I brought the cone of a giant sequoia and actually a little glass full of giant sequoia seeds. And they're a symbol for resilience and in a way also community. And that's very much symbolic for what we do with KLIM. We're all about improving the resilience of agriculture, of farms, in order to secure food security for now over 8 billion people to feed. Farming cannot continue degrading soils globally. And we have, since the onset of modern agriculture, released around 500 billion tons of CO2 into the atmosphere. For reference, this is more than 10 times as much as all flights through the history of mankind combined have released. The future of agriculture will definitely be revolving around restoring soil health.
Robert, what is one sustainability trend you would bet on for the next 5 years?
There will be more and more activities, intervention, business decisions that are making sense both economically and ecologically.
How is AI-powered farming help fight climate change?
A sustainable business model is any business model that inseparably connects revenue growth from positive impact. Will farmers be replaced by robots?
Hello one and all, welcome to Unboxing the Future. I'm your host, the Machine.
And I'm Iva Jankovic.
Berlin has always reinvented itself. If we talk only about the last decades, it has gone from the playground for artists and hackers to the capital of tech and science. With talents, innovation and investment in place, how is Berlin becoming Europe's deep tech and impact business powerhouse? Well, that's the topic we're going to be unboxing today with our special guest.
And our guest today is an impact entrepreneur who holds a PhD from Oxford in engineering science. He's also the originator of Sustainable Business Model Canvas and Impact Canvas, and a co-founder of, if I might say, soon to be a unicorn in regenerative agriculture, KLIM. Our guest today, Robert.
Welcome, Robert.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for coming.
It's our pleasure, Robert. We always ask our guests to bring an object that represents them professionally. What object did you bring, Robert, and what is the story behind?
I brought the cone of a giant sequoia and actually a little glass full of giant sequoia seeds. And this is something that's very dear to me personally and also is quite symbolic for the company KLIM we're building. Giant sequoias are trees that grow at the west coast of the US, and they grow almost 100 meters tall and up to 3,500 years old. And they're a symbol for resilience and in a way also community. And that's very much symbolic for what we do with KLIM. We're all about improving the resilience of agriculture, of farms, in order to secure food security for now over 8 billion people to feed. Why do giant sequoias actually play an interesting role here? So what's interesting about these trees is they grow, and when they grow, develop a very thick bark made out of cork, which prevents them from regularly occurring fires. So this bark, they grow from birth onwards, and it can grow very thick. And whilst other forests get destroyed by fires, giant sequoias do not. They actually stand together, literally, and actually, as many of you probably know, as trees, they are also connected to one another. The roots of the giant sequoias intertwine and via mycelium actually exchange nutrients and information. And so trees can actually support other trees in distress after a fire occurred. And this standing together is symbolic for the farmer community we are building with KLIM, where every farmer can contributing with know-how to furthering the knowledge about regenerative agriculture and then help other farmers actually successfully implement regenerative agricultural practices. And resilience is super important because with the ever more frequently increasing climate change related crop losses, for example, due to droughts or severe weather events where heavy rains are eroding the fields, building up a more resilient form of agriculture is essential to keep feeding the planet. And in this way, resilience is another super important aspect of giant sequoias that we with KLIM want to essentially enable our farmers to improve on. So, and apart from that, I happen to grow giant sequoias as a hobby. So I returned from the US once with a cone, and when I put it on my cupboard, lots of seeds fell out. And of course, I tried to grow trees out of it, and I successfully did. And now they're standing in the gardens of my friends, and they're growing. By now, some of them are already 5 or 6 meters tall. And it's just amazing to be able to give life to something that will outlast you. As I said, they can grow up to 3,500 years old. And in the same way, everybody at KLIM wants to contribute to and build something that will outlast themselves as well, which is the restoration of our ecosystems and our farming system in form of a farming system where farmers can embrace the complexities of nature rather than fighting it, and this way create a farming system that can actually be sustained across the globe. And in case anybody wants to ever see a sequoia grove, I can only recommend visiting the giant sequoia groves in California. It's an amazing experience to stand amongst these centuries-old trees.
Incredible story, man. It's amazing. And I'm curious about how big are the gardens of your friends?
So I always joke when we plant the trees, and in case the neighbors might overhear us, we say, this is a pygmy tree, and hopefully the neighbors won't realize that it's going to be such massive trees. But to be honest, it won't be their problem, because even though they grow fast, they're conifers essentially, it will take still hundreds of years for them to actually overshadow the little garden mansion of the neighbors. Okay. And so in that sense, I think it's not so much of a problem.
Incredible story. So can you make a sound with it, Robert?
Happy to do so. So this is how giant sequoia seeds sound. They're tiny, as you can see. Mm-hmm. And that's the sound of a cone clapping against the glass containing them.
Beautiful sound. So I ask you that because what we're going to do now is we're going to make music together. I'm going to build a basis here using sounds of my body and some electronic sounds. And you and Iva are going to join me on the jam, okay?
All right.
So let me start. You can join me. Further from the mic. Both of you can be a little bit further from the mic, yeah? Nice. Something in the mic. I'm gonna loop it.
Yes.
Can you tell me something in the microphone?
Okay. Giant sequoias stand for resilience and community. They are resilient because their bark protects them against the regularly occurring forest fires. And standing in a grove, they're actually forming a community that can support each other through a dense network of roots. And standing in a grove, they're actually forming a community that can support each other through a dense network of roots. and standing in a grove, forming a community that can support each other through a dense network of roots. And standing in a grove, they're actually forming a community that can support each other. And standing in a grove, they're actually forming a community that can support each other through a dense network of roots. And standing in a grove, they're actually forming a community that can support each other through a dense network of roots. And standing in a grove, they're actually forming a community that can support each other through a dense network of roots. And standing in a grove, they're actually forming a community that can support each other. 1, 2, 3.
Nice.
Yeah, thank you very much, Robert.
Now I have the soundtrack for another KLIM tradition, which is to dance regenerative methods in expression dance. And I think our team will be both happy and afraid to know that we now have the soundtrack for that.
Amazing. Well, we're very happy to deliver.
Super, super nice.
Exciting. Robert, thank you again, for sharing this story. There were so many layers to your object that, I just want to kind of dig into the questions to that. But before we get to there, I want to start big. I want to start with big future questions. Robert, what is the future of farming?
Well, I think we know one thing for sure, that farming cannot continue degrading soils globally. One of the most dangerous developments over the past 100 years was that global soils have lost in soil health, on average, in a significant margin. So a good proxy or measure for soil health is soil organic carbon. And to give an idea how much of this we have lost, soil organic carbon is the organic content in the soil. And we have lost globally 50% of all stored soil organic carbon in the past 100 years approximately. And this brings with it broad range of negative outcomes. On the one hand, as you destroy soil organic carbon, you're releasing CO2 into the atmosphere. And we have, since the onset of modern agriculture, released around 500 billion tons of CO2 into the atmosphere. For reference, this is more than 10 times as much as all flights through the history of mankind combined have released. But not only does it release lots of CO2 into the atmosphere, which of course then accelerates climate change, it also destroys biodiversity in the soils. And as you destroy biodiversity in the soils, it's very bad for many environmental outcomes. You also reduce resilience of the soils. For example, the water retention rate or the water absorption rates of soils is directly linked to the soil organic carbon content. And as you reduce the soil organic carbon content, it means that you will have a harder and harder time to store water, and that means that your yields are much more susceptible to crop loss due to droughts, which is a massive problem. In addition, as you destroy soils, you're actually really literally destroying soil. So for example, in many areas in Germany, there are sticks in the soils which show that over the past decades, the soil layer has decreased. So basically, you're literally losing soil. And that is also accelerated through erosion. That is also a problem that comes with the destruction of soil organic carbon loss. And then finally, as you destroy fertility of soils, you are reducing the nutrient availability in soils. And that means you reduce the nutrient density in the foods you can produce, which means that they don't taste as well, but even more importantly, they're not as nutritious and not as healthy. So this is a huge challenge, and the future of agriculture will definitely be revolving around restoring soil health, because we cannot continue on this path. We're still on a trajectory of losing soil health each year, and the future will be all around restoring or regenerating soil health. And that means to take a much more holistic look at agriculture. So you need to really make soil health the center of your farming strategy, which means to look at all kind of outcomes in combination, not just yield, but yield, resilience, nutrient densities, organic carbon content, and so forth. And then form a much more complex equation where you want to optimize against. And as you can imagine, this complexity brings with it the need for decision support. And in my view, the future of farming will be one where farmers are solving much more complex decision problems every year, every day, and they really become more like artisans, the masters, even more so than they are today. They are already, of course, but it will be, in my view, a transformation of the way we think about agriculture.
You can take the headphones off. You can put it on the table. Very interesting answer. It's incredible. Like, what is yield?
Yield means how many tons of wheat or potatoes you're harvesting per hectare, for example. So it means the quantity of the produce you're generating.
Okay.
Ertrag in German.
Little bit scary, but also very interesting and very important actually to discuss. Let me ask a next, also very open future question. How is AI-powered farming help fight climate change?
Well, AI can be used in many, many different ways in farming. So on the one hand, it can be used to improve decision support for farmers. For example, if you have access to large data set about, for example, how certain regenerative practices are performing for different farmers in the same context across the globe, you could draw conclusions based on this big data set and then enable farmers with decision support. So machine learning enabled recommendation engines could come into play. It can also be used to inform, for example, strategies to fight weeds. For example, you could base solutions on the ability to detect weeds or plant diseases via image analysis, and then inform farmers in the region about an upcoming danger related to a disease. Or you could use it, for example, to help businesses such as KLIM to build more scalable verification processes of what's actually happening on the field. For example, satellite-based image analysis, or which could offer you solutions for crop detection, which you already at a relatively high resolution you can do via remote sensing, or field boundary delineation, field boundary detection. And there's really a broad range of where this can help. Of course, also combination with IoT and other technologies where you have, for example, sensors that can analyze where you should selectively place certain interventions on the field, or you could do weeding that's not chemical but actually mechanical, where image detection helps, for example, a machine to remove weeds in a very targeted way. There's an abundance of use cases where AI can help and enable the future of farming.
Incredible, yeah.
I'm almost imagining, for the future, a field being managed by robots that are communicating, either based on the AI language or something, to be able to make smarter or independent decisions.
And drones and picking up the things.
Scary, so I like the robots on the ground, yeah.
Robert, what is one sustainability trend you would bet on for the next 5 years?
Well, that's a very broad question. I believe there's many possible answers here, but I think one thing that we are definitely going to see is that in the Venn diagram of economic and ecological interests, the intersection will grow. There will be more and more activities, intervention, business decisions that are making sense both economically and ecologically, where it is impossible as an industry to ignore environmental impact because it actually damages your bottom line, your PML. And there's various ways you could use metaphors to describe this trend. For example, recently there was a little bit of buzz about the idea to be able to, if you're an impact entrepreneur, to sell your solution, or if you're a climate tech entrepreneur, you need to be able to sell your solution to climate change deniers. And I think that encapsulates this idea that the overlap of what economic and ecological solutions are will increase. And I think that's probably the biggest trend. And it's unfortunately the case because we've reached a stage where our ecosystem has been damaged to the extent that it already massively disrupts our economics.
Yeah, it's a good trend. Like, I like the concept of trying to sell a climate product to non-climate believers, no? Like deniers. It gives hope. It's interesting. I'd like to ask you the question of the season, which is, Berlin has talent, innovation, investment in place. How is Berlin becoming Europe's impact business powerhouse?
I think there are many centers for impact entrepreneurship in Europe. I'm in Paris, in London a lot, and you have those startup communities everywhere. I think in any large metropolis in Europe, you have a large amount of people who really care about generating an impact, for whom not only money, but also meaning is important in what they do. And you have a lot of entrepreneurial energy. Of course, we are, in terms of mindset and culture, still, let's face it, far behind what's happening in the Valley, for example, in Silicon Valley. But Europe is catching up. And this results in more and more impact-related startups being founded everywhere. And Berlin is certainly one of the major cities where this is driving and striving. And I can tell already, it's been many years ago, I've been teaching sustainable product innovation at various universities in Berlin, and the amount of students who are so eager and interested in becoming impact entrepreneurs forecasted very clearly that there will be much more coming in this space. So I think it's a combination of people seeking to build meaningful businesses, many individuals, a combination of also the time being right to do this. There's also certain support structures for this, lots of incubators, and especially the VC landscape, the early stage angel investment VC landscape with lots of incubators and accelerators has really enabled many of those startups to overcome the initial hurdles, and that's a really good thing.
I want to take that, especially the last bit, and ask you actually further. I mean, you have just so much experience either helping sustainable businesses, designing them in the first place with the baseline of the different canvases that you originated, but also from your own founding journey. Is Berlin a good place for a sustainability startup, particularly considering the support that they need? You already mentioned you have strength in the desire, the right timing. How about the support? Does Berlin have it?
Well, if we compare it to Europe, I think there's many things that speak for Berlin or other European cities. And first and foremost, I would say that a startup requires much more in industry that it's ready for its product and funding than it requires support structures. Maybe this is a bit controversial, but I would say that if there's no market there, and if there's no investment opportunities at an early stage, then no matter the support structures you have in little grants or a little bit of free office space here or a bit of advisory there, doesn't really matter. And luckily in Europe, Europe is probably the center in many ways in the world for impact-related initiatives, technology development, not only in the startup way, but also at technology readiness levels 1, 2, or 3, so really R&D heavy. And the industry is really there to pick these solutions up. So for example, KLIM could not have succeeded if we would not have very early on found businesses at various stages from small food companies to the largest food company in the world that were willing to actually engage with us and use our product and become paying customers. This, I think, is the most important area that you need to have the support you need. And I think there Europe in many ways is even more advanced than what we see in the US, certainly in our industry.
That's good to listen. It's great to hear that, actually.
And talking about investment, because you highlighted kind of the importance of that. First of all, congratulations. You guys just raised 22 million for KLIM end of last year, like a very impressive number, and very, very happy to hear that, companies like yours is getting an investment needed to grow forward. But let me ask you, how was that process of getting investment as an impact startup in Berlin?
I would say it doesn't really matter whether you're based in Berlin or Munich or anywhere else in Europe. I would say getting investment as an impact startup in Europe, and I think it in general is always really hard to fundraise for every founder. And everybody who tells you differently, I don't know, maybe they were lucky or they're super, super brilliant and smart. For most people, it's really hard to raise. And that's no different in the US in certain ways either. And then overlaying this general difficulty are certain trends and bubbles. For example, there was a clean tech bubble in the early 2000s. Certainly, there was something one could call a bubble in agtech maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And currently, we see a more challenging situation. So the difficulty to fundraise fluctuates with market trends and is also related to the stage you're raising at. So, for example, there's quite a lot of support, I would say, for very, very early stage startups in Europe, especially in the impact space, but less so when it comes to going to beyond Series A, when you need Series B investors that write much larger tickets. And in general, until maybe 3 years ago, you would see still a massive difference in risk appetite between European investors and US equivalents, where you could really tell that in Europe, investors are looking much more at a higher level of certainty. There are more proof points. You can really show that this business has traction, less about the vision, more about the actual numbers, whereas in the US, much more vision-driven. And both approaches, of course, have pros and cons. For example, probably in Europe, you have a higher success rate than in the US. More of the startups you're investing are surviving to a Series A or so than perhaps in the US. On the other hand, there's of course also a con. You typically don't invest into the super crazy startups that then would yield outsized returns. If you just look at the amount of unicorns that are coming from the US versus Europe, especially in digital technology related markets, you see a clear difference there. So in that sense, it's been traditionally much more difficult in Europe. The investment climate is improving, and currently I can tell, because I'm in the US quite frequently, the VCs there are super bearish. They're super risk averse now as well. So in many ways, in some areas, they're even more risk averse than the European ones now, at least in my personal experience. So it always depends in which industry are you raising. So you cannot say impact entrepreneurship is this difficult or so. It depends. Are you raising in the agriculture sector? Are you raising in something that could be framed purely as an AI SaaS solution? Are you raising in food delivery for sustainable foods? Huge difference. Which time? Are you raising in 2023 or 2025? And which stage? And from which investors? So it's a very heterogeneous experience.
And so you gave an example of 2023. What would be, for example, for the next 2 years? How do you think would be the scenario for Europe? Like, you think it's getting, so to be more specific, you think it, because for what I understood, I have a feeling that Europe, it's more open and it's taking more risks in investing in impact than US, for example. Is that correct?
I think that in some industries, such as ours, I would say sometimes the market is more advanced than in the US. I wouldn't say that Europeans are taking more risk in general. But to answer your previous question, where do I see the future? I believe nobody knows where the market will go. Nobody has a crystal ball, and certainly not me. I'm not a VC. VCs know much, much more about this. I only know it from the perspective of a founder. My guess would be, but it's totally uneducated, that we won't see a return to the sort of bubble-like crazy investment times that we had 3 years ago in the next 2 or 3 years. I would be surprised if it would happen. And then, of course, you have to calculate in the total unpredictability of the world right now, where nobody knows what will be said or decided tomorrow, mainly driven from the US. So,
yeah.
Absolutely. So the moment you do manage to raise funds, it becomes one of the biggest challenges of acquiring talent. And KLIM is a remote company, or do you have?
We're hybrid. We have an office at Senefelder Platz in Berlin, beautiful office, but we'll change soon to a bigger one. And currently we're a hybrid culture where many people are in the office all or most of the time, and some are only working remotely. And you could say that having a hybrid culture is more challenging than being purely remote or purely office. Mm-hmm. So we're always doing our best to make it work. So far, we've been doing a good job, I believe in it. But of course, my ambition is we can always do better there.
For sure. And how was it? I mean, you're probably still in the process. How is it to acquire talent here in Berlin?
I would say, and many of my friends that are also founders agree with it, that acquiring top talent is probably one of the most challenging tasks as a founder. And I would not really have believed that 5 or 6 years ago, but now I do believe it. Mm-hmm. And I haven't really wrapped my head around precisely why that is. I think for us, perhaps also true, especially because we are operating in a relatively complex area. We need to have people who understand farmers, agronomists. We need to have people who understand scalable enterprise sales, consultative enterprise sales, marketing to 2 different audiences, food companies and farmers. An amazing product and engineering team with the capability to build data-driven product functionalities, AI, ML-driven, for example. World-class operations to make sure all of this works in harmony, efficiently, effectively. So this requires a lot of anybody joining the company. On the other hand, it's also an amazing opportunity because if you can master this complexity well, you have built a moat in itself based on mastering complexity. I know it's a little bit going against the primary rules of startups to simply focus on one particular product, but for several reasons, we've decided against that approach. So I think for that reason, it's quite challenging. And what we're looking for are always people who are incredibly smart and able to understand complex systems quickly, who are very good at concept development of, for example, solutions, can think holistically, can think things through, and are both able to deal with the uncertainty that every startup brings, and at the same time, in certain areas, really focus on reliable quality results. This sounds like very generic expectations for roles, and of course, for each role it's different, but finding the combination of this skill set is harder than I would have thought.
And do you think Berlin has something to offer that other European cities don't have in that sense of the talent?
I lack the suitable comparison of the talent pools of Berlin versus London, Madrid, or Paris to really answer that question. I lack a sufficient sample size to make any meaningful comparison of the talent pool of Berlin to other European capitals, unfortunately. So I'm afraid I can't really answer that question.
But do you think Berlin has something to offer that the other cities don't have for the talents?
I think that Berlin has much to offer for anybody in the city It's an incredible city. I'm living here now for over 10 years. Offers a lot of culture. You have amazing environment, landscape right around across the edge of the city, where you can have amazing recovery times in the weekends. You have, of course, lots of abilities to have fun and party around. You have amazing universities. You have, for Germany, definitely a very dense network of VCs that are there. Mm-hmm. And you have living conditions that are getting much harder by the year, but still comparable to London or other British cities where I lived, or Paris, are still less expensive. And in my view, compared to some other cities, especially the crazy examples such as London or New York, Berlin offers a better balance of life, I think. And that can translate in a more sustainable tenures of employees at companies, I believe.
Yeah, I totally agree. Robert, I'd like to know, how diverse is your industry?
Well, depends on the dimension of diversity you're looking at. If you look at the typical farmer, there's a lot of diversity in age. There's young, very ambitious, motivated farmers. There's very old farmers. There's farmers with large farm sizes, small farm sizes. There's farmers who rent the land, those who own it. There's some who are organic, some are conventional. There's a majority of male farmers, of course, not surprisingly, but there's also many female farmers we know and work with. In terms of food industry, difficult to say how diverse it is, because we're dealing mainly with the procurement, finance, supply chain, and sustainability departments, where, in my experience, in terms of diversity of age or gender, I see a lot of diversity. Depends on the dimension you're looking at. I think I don't have an agricultural background, so I wasn't in this sector 5 years ago. And I would say that it hasn't surprised me in any massive way in terms of diversity.
And what do you think this diversity is bringing to the table, or is adding to the industry?
So you see it most related to our business, that the young generation of farmers is, in my view, often very curious and eager to try new things, to not tread the trodden path, to really experiment with different regenerative methods. And this results in bottom-up driven innovation and moves the sector forward, which in my view, is amazing. Mm-hmm. Luckily, however, we don't have sort of a cluster of young farmers who are ready to transition to regenerative agriculture and a monolithic, rigid group of more experienced farmers who don't. You see this transition across the age cohorts, mainly driven because regenerative agriculture makes sense economically for any farmer of any farm size. Now, of course, you can say, what does it mean, regenerative agriculture? And that's a valid question. We have, of course, our view and definition of that. But in general, there's a readiness to transition for everybody.
Very good to hear that. It gives hope. It's a very hopeful conversation, Robert. Thank you very much. And now it's time for the questions out of the box. So we told our community that someone of your industry with your profile would come to the show, and they sent us questions. You can choose one box and pick up one question.
Will farmers be replaced by robots?
There goes my doomsday scenario of robots on the farm.
My personal opinion is definitely not. I think that automated machinery can augment the farmer, but never replace the farmer. I don't think that that's really possible. And we are probably quite far away from a robot being able to basically do everything that a farmer needs to do. So I think there will be farmer automation, yes. There will be a lot of augmentation of human capacity with machine and digital capacity, but a complete replacement, I don't see it in the next 30 years. But who am I to say? We see a rapid acceleration of the proliferance of AI, so maybe I'm just somebody who keeps seeing the horse carriages and has no awareness of the upcoming cars. So,
Cool. You can put it back in and close it. And yeah. You can close it and go for the next box.
If my neighbor is using pesticides, how can my plantation remain sustainable? So, not sure whether I understand the question. If I interpret it as, can one use pesticides and remain sustainable?
Or maybe, I don't know the formulation, but maybe not sustainable, but kind of clean, no? Right? If you're trying to avoid pesticides and the one besides is using brings to your, I guess is that I'm trying.
So first of all, in this context, it's important to look at what does sustainability mean. And sustainability is to look at both the economical, the ecological, and the socio-economical impacts of what you do. And the primary role of farming is to provide the planet with a sustainable source of healthy food. And now if you look at the role of pesticides, you need to judge this on a spectrum. There is one extreme where a farmer might use for any upcoming disease or weed chemical pesticides without thinking, and this way destroy a lot of biodiversity and create harms. And there's another extreme where a farmer under no circumstances ever uses any form of pesticide and then might create another form of harms through, for example, crop loss. For example, if you would, at any farm that is currently in the average user group of using pesticides, cut its use down to 0 from day one, you would see yield drops. So you would reduce the amount of food that is being harvested. Now, you could say that on this particular farm, the environmental footprint goes down or gets better. But somebody somewhere needs to produce the difference in food or the delta that you have generated. So somewhere the food needs to be produced and that will generate an environmental impact. We call that leakage. So the best way to look at it is ideally you want to enable farmers to improve soil health, referring to what I mentioned earlier, to the extent that they need to use less fertilizer, less pesticide than previously required, whilst maintaining or increasing their yields. Otherwise, you just are shifting the negative impacts from one farm to the next. So it's a question where the simple answer, pesticides are always bad, is not the answer that yields the most impact or most good. So you need to look at it in a much more differentiated way.
In a more holistic way, right? I like the approach is, to see all the perspectives instead of just demonizing pesticides. Yeah, very interesting.
Very complex.
Next box.
Final one.
Will food one day be finally healthy and sustainably produced? This is what KLIM, our company, is striving to achieve, because we believe that using regenerative agriculture and scaling it globally, you can actually achieve sustainability effects and an improvement on health. How can you do that? If you are transitioning our food system to regenerative agriculture in a controlled way and speed, then you will slowly reduce the amount of fertilizer and pesticide that is required to achieve the same yield. You will reduce crop losses due to droughts or severe weather events, and therefore reduce leakage effects, and therefore directly contribute to sustainably produced food. And at the same time, you will improve nutrient availability in the soils and nutrient density, nutritiousness of the food, and therefore the health of the food you produce. So you can achieve all the areas with one solution. You can produce more economically as a farmer, because if you use regenerative agriculture in a proper way, you will be more profitable because you have less crop loss, you need less fertilizer, and you therefore spend less on a product that is only increasing in price, as the energy required to produce fertilizer is quite high. Sometimes it quadruples in a year. So you'll be more profitable. You will be more environmentally sustainable because you are reducing CO2 emissions from your farming activities. You're actively capturing and storing CO2 in the ground through carbon sequestration. You are improving biodiversity outcomes of what you're doing. And of course, you ensure food security. And thirdly, you are improving the health of the food. That's why our mission with KLIM is to scale regenerative agriculture. And I personally have never worked on a more impactful initiative in my whole career, and have always focused on impact, than I do now with regenerative agriculture with the whole KLIM team.
Incredible. And well, we're talking a lot about regenerative agriculture. What is that, Robert? Please explain us.
So the focus of regenerative agriculture, so first of all, there's no unified definition of what regenerative agriculture is. This is not a big problem though, because what we want is to achieve the results I mentioned earlier. And the best way to achieve that is to focus on soil health. Mm-hmm. Soil health, that means you have a stable soil structure, stable aggregates in the soils around which, for example, sonic carbon can form and build up, a rich biodiverse life in the soil itself. And if you improve soil health around those three dimensions, you will automatically generate the benefits related to resilience, emission reduction, carbon sequestration, nutrient quality. Now, how do you get there? How do you rebuild soil health? Regenerative agriculture generally is based around a range of regenerative principles. For example, one is you want to have deep root penetration on your field. So rather than a plant which has a lot of shoots is what's above the ground, and tiny amount of roots, ideally you want to have a plant that has a better ratio of shoots above the ground versus roots below the ground. Because via the roots, it happens that you actually are rebuilding soil health and can sequester soil organic carbon. You also want to have permanent coverage of the soil. So for example, rather than having a first crop wheat followed by bare earth and then followed by barley, you want to cover that soil in the transition from the first crop to the second crop, which can be several months. And that you do with so-called cover crops or undersown, where you are introducing a crop that is typically not harvested for purpose, that consists of sometimes up to 60 different seeds. And each of those seeds has a different impact and effect on the soil itself, on soil health, on the following crop. You also want to minimize soil disturbance. So you ideally want to use reduced tillage, for example, or minimum tillage, rather than just plowing your fields all the time. You also want to have a broad crop rotation, not just the same limited crop rotation each year. And at some point, the most advanced regenerative principles are around integrated animal husbandry. For example, rotational grazing, if it comes to cattle, or silvopastoral systems. And you have a range of regenerative methods that can all achieve these principles. I mentioned cover crops and undersown. There are hedges you can plant. You can use flowering strips, brownfield greenery. You can use really fancy stuff such as agroforestry, where you have rows of trees. In between there's, for example, wheat that you can harvest in a normal way. And you can already see from what I'm describing that this form of agriculture, much more complex than what we typically understand as conventional agriculture, requires much more agronomic support, know-how, and, which is what we are working on with KLIM, digital decision support to actually make it happen.
Incredible.
I always feel like a manual is being written right now. Like, I love it because it's so important, and there's so, like, I just learned so many things that I just assumed were one way or the other, but the complexities and how you're breaking them down, I just love the way you're explaining. So thank you for that.
Let me just sketch the boxes. Can you please pass to me, Robert?
And maybe I quickly do kind of want to stay in this form of, breaking down what does actually something mean. And I want to ask you, what is a sustainable business model?
Yes. So, in my view, a sustainable business model is any business model that inseparably connects revenue growth from positive impact. And I mentioned earlier, sustainability, you can say it's about economics, the money part, ecology, the environment, and socio-economic factors, such as, for example, health, equity, and so forth. A sustainable business model is not a business model where you, for example, sell shoes, and for every shoe you sell, you donate 20 cents to delivering shoes to somebody in Argentina. That's not a sustainable business model, because you could separate how you make money easily from this business model, in my personal view, so not definition. Mm-hmm. If you, however, have a business model where you cannot make money without generating positive impact, and you cannot generate positive impact without making money, then that's my personal definition of a sustainable business model. And that's what you ideally want to achieve, and there's many ways to achieve it. It's, of course, a bit harder and requires a little bit more thinking, but luckily there's many tools with which you can actually derive such sustainable business models, because impact can be generated in a variety of ways. And I started working on this in 2013 and then later developed, for example, the Sustainable Business Model Canvas or the Impact Canvas, which are great tools to actually, from the ground up, design such business models.
Incredible. I love the little knockdown you gave it to Tom's shoes.
Well deserved, I have to say. Well deserved.
Yeah. Cool. It's very interesting. So planting trees to cover the hole is not impact, right? It's just covering holes.
It's impact, but I wouldn't call it a sustainable business model. I would call it a business model with a sustainable or with an impact component added to it.
Yeah. An add-on. No?
An add-on, yes.
Yeah. Cool.
And by this way, you can, of course, and I'm actually not saying that this is bad, you can add a sustainable impact component to any business model. Mm-hmm. But it's much more beautiful, more challenging, more fun to actually build a sustainable business model.
Oh, for sure, for sure.
I want to take that to also thinking about large corporations today. So you already mentioned with KLIM, you're working with a lot of very big players, either in food, but also in food production and the whole value chain. And, they're known for adding certain things to their business model to particularly offset in overall their footprint. So what are the 3 takeaways that you can share as almost as a tip for other startups working in impact from your experience of working with some of the largest organizations in food production?
So the first thing I would like to share is that the times where you are entering an organization, and most people will laugh about your mission-driven approach or your purpose, are long over. I remember I worked in, for example, the automotive industry 12 or so years ago, and I was shocked when certain managers would say, of course we want inbuilt obsolescence, that's our revenue model. And they were actually laughing about anything related to improving sustainable impact. you will not find this in the food companies that at least we have spoken with. So the first thing I would advise is, regardless of what's the main business partner in the food company, whether it's procurement or finance or else, go through the sustainability departments, and there you will have actually motivated, ethical people who really want to make a difference. I have to say that this really surprised me positively to see how many people really care. And I've seen that across the bank, from big retailers, and we work with basically most of the German retailers, to the big food corporates. Yes, Nestle sustainability team, incredible people. I know they get bashed a lot, but if you actually work with them, it's much different from what you might believe if you only look at some of the memes. That's the first thing I would advise. The second thing I would advise is that don't give up. Sales cycles in the food industry are long. If you have a good product and if you engage in a sort of consultative form of enterprise sales where you really understand what their needs are, really dig with them into the problem together, you can shorten sales cycles. When I started with this industry, I hear the horror stories of 3-year sales cycle to sell to a certain Swiss retailer. That's deadly for a startup, but it doesn't need to be that way. I think you can shorten the sales cycle with a smart entry point by the sustainability departments and a consultative enterprise sales approach. And what would be a third thing that I'd advise? To initially experiment very systematically to find out what's your ICP, your ideal customer profile. Who are actually the food stakeholders you want to sell to? Is it the retailers? Is it the food companies? If yes, which size, which supply chain, which entry point, if it's not the sustainability departments, and so forth.
Very good tips.
Very good.
What do you think are the 3 main challenges that green tech impact startups are facing to grow in Germany and European Union today?
Number 1, unfortunately, fewer people care about impact today than 3 or 5 years ago. Let's face it. I grew up in a generation where I saw the beginnings of the environmental disaster, and I remember sitting in geography lessons when I was, 12 or so. I thought, when I've grown up, the parents will have solved this mess. Of course, they didn't, and it's getting worse every year. And for me, it's hard to understand that sustainability-related topics are dropping on the agenda. But it's not that I don't understand how it's happening. We're having a poly-crisis world with lots of economic pressure on each individual. So the first challenge, I think, is sustainability is not at the forefront anymore, unfortunately, even though it should be together with a few other areas. That's what makes it difficult. Second, finding a sustainable business model is not straightforward and easy. It's possible. It's not possible in all industries, and it's not possible for all areas where you should make impact. So something that can happen very often is that if you approach impact anything like me, is that if you look at the problem that has the most impact, if it's being solved, and if you then look at which of those expressions of the problem you have the most heart or passion for solving, it might be that you come across a problem where you actually cannot find a sustainable business model for. And then you need to make the choice whether you continue to work on the problem and solve it via other means than classic impact entrepreneurship, which I would always encourage to do for those who really, really care about the problem, or whether you look for another problem where you actually have a large enough intersection of economical and ecological considerations. So it's harder to find this business model. If it wasn't harder, let's face it, then we wouldn't have the environmental problems. If the solutions to addressing our environmental challenges would be business models that lie around on the surface like gold nuggets, then we wouldn't have the environmental problems. It's a no-brainer. And I think the third one, I think, is related to the culture you build in the company. I think if you're working in impact, you will naturally attract a lot of really motivated people that want to make a positive difference, which is amazing. And yet you still need to make sure that you identify people who can both thrive in a mission-driven environment and in one that focuses on operational excellence, which you need to instill in your company to compete internationally.
Very interesting, yeah. Now we're gonna jump to the questions from the guest book. So we have a guest book like a hotel. Every guest leaves their feedback about their participation in the show, and they leave a question to the next guest without knowing who it will be. So where you have the paper, it's, yeah. You can read the question and go for it.
Ooh, I like the question. Which of your perspectives in life would most people disagree with? So, here's one that's not at all related to environmental sustainability. And I'm answering it because it's the first thing that comes to my mind, not having read that question before, of course. And I know it for a fact that most people disagree with me because I've seen the statistic. So I think we live in a world where we have seen the benefits of individualism and where the focus on personal achievement, personal optimization has progressed so much, in my personal view, that people have forgotten what duty means, what duty to a greater good means in many ways, and have forgotten that sometimes you need to sacrifice personal freedoms or convenience to serve something greater than yourself, and that in this service of something greater than yourself, you don't just need to look at the disadvantages for yourself, but actually in that service there lies great sort of rewarding feeling. You see that in many, many expressions. One of which, for example, is, in my personal view, the willingness of people to stand up for their country and, for example, also defend it. And I've seen the statistics. And personally, I disagree with the idea that you should, it's okay to say, I will not defend my country and I will let others do that for me. I disagree with that completely. And I know that around 80% of Germans would disagree with me on that.
Yeah, I love the vision, and the example is a very specific one, but it can very easily relate also to the community life, right? Like for a greater cause of a community, society. So yeah, it's very interesting, very beautiful.
The future for connectiveness and community-driven, like it. Yeah.
You can give me the book back. Thank you very much.
Nice. So we have one section that we called rapid fire question, and it means exactly that. We're gonna ask you questions, and we expect, like you answered the guest book, the first thing that pops into your mind, quickly we go for it. Why did you decide to create KLIM?
I decided because I was looking for the problem with the greatest positive impact, if solved, that I could work on, because I didn't want to have impact FOMO anymore. I didn't want to feel that elsewhere I could create a greater impact, which sometimes in my previous initiatives I felt. And I really concluded in a very systematic, geeky engineering way, with an Excel chart with many colorful tabs, that indeed the problem with the largest impact is regenerative agriculture, with impact in climate, food security, equity, health, and many more.
Love it. What is the biggest achievement you're proud of?
KLIM. for sure.
Mic drop. Done. Love it.
Proud of the whole team that has built KLIM.
Amazing. What are the 3 lessons you've learned as a climate tech founder?
The climate tech founder. I would say, as an impact founder, I have learned if you are passionate about the problem, even if it's crazy, and even if most people tell you you're absolutely insane to try it, if you persist, eventually you will A, find a solution, and B, people who will join you in the topic. Second, I have learned that if you purely focus on impact, not on ideology and dogma, so that means doesn't matter how, with whom you create the best impact, if the impact is there and larger than if you wouldn't work with this person, then it's the largest impact, then you will A, of course, create the largest impact, and B, make a few enemies. And what is the third thing I would say that I would have learned? Yes, I believe if you are working in impact and you create a mission-driven company, you'll be able to create a company culture that is more awesome than in any other space I could imagine.
Good. You kind of answered already, but I'm going to give it a try to it. What advice would you give to someone that wants to start an impact business nowadays?
I would advise, and I've mentioned already, to look at starting the business in a very systematic way. It may not be what's intuitive to everybody, but I think if you approach it in a structured way by looking at what are actually the problems that, if solved, would move the needle, which subset of these problems do I feel passion for? You need to feel passion for, otherwise you will not be able to sustain the startup journey. And then choose the most difficult one, where most people tell you it can't be done. Why? Because A, if you choose a difficult problem, it's likely that you won't have 5,000 other startups that work on it at the same time. And actually, it's more neglected problem, and therefore it's more worthy of your time in this way, I think. Secondly, I think startups should be there to solve the really difficult stuff. Startups have a failure ratio of over 90%. If you already fail 90% of the time, you might as well do something that's almost impossible to do. Then I would say, don't give up. Any problem in the world, if you systematically dig deeper into understanding the foundations, the problem-solution space, the technological, regulatory, cultural influences that shape the whole dynamic, you will eventually come up with a solution. Don't give up. The beginning, when you're alone, is extremely difficult. You're alone, it's hard, but eventually you will come up with a concept, you will galvanize support around it, and you will build something beautiful in many cases.
Amazing advices. I love, and the one that I like the most is like, don't be lazy. I think there's 90% of failures because people, I just have an idea, let's do a startup, but they don't really think thoroughly. So I love the nudge also on the scene. Thank you very much for the insights, Robert. So now you're going to become our guest producer. We're going to do now together an electronic beat, and this music is going to be the soundtrack of our episode. I love your face. We're going to do it in a very systematic way, so don't worry. Think like now we're doing a very colorful Excel sheet of sounds. Okay?
In layers. All right. There's going to be many layers.
So let's put the headphones again. The first thing we need to do is to pick up the speed of the song, right? So it's like the little seed, the first step. Quicker, slower.
It's perfect, like drops of water. That's the rhythm we need.
Perfect. So would you start now with rhythms?
So, disclaimer, I'm the least musical person that I know. And my musical teacher in school told me to stop singing and sit down. So I'm not very qualified to do this, but I'm happy to try. What would I like to add now? some waviness.
Okay, I think I can translate that. Let me change something here again. So before I give you some waves, I like to say that your teacher should be in prison now.
Yes, I agree.
And the people who says what you just said are probably the ones that can have the biggest opportunity in doing something special. So forget it. Let's erase that memory out of your head and let's focus on the talent and
let's focus on the waves.
Exactly. So, and I can even maybe do it more wavy. Wait. I can add the waves later, like more movement. Do you like? It feels like it's wavy or not much?
I think wavy more in terms of some watery, oceanness wave.
Okay, I just have kind of electronic sound.
Or you can mimic the wind blowing through a forest.
So, and you're gonna do it now, with your voice.
The wind.
Yeah. Amazing, man. I told you, were born to do this. I love it. So what will be the next thing?
The creaking of branches of trees, which I'm not sure whether I will be able to imitate.
I love the challenges you're giving today. This is going to be very good.
Like lately, a lot of people has been asking me for violins and trumpets. It's already a challenge because I have only electronic sounds.
We are nature-based solutions.
Yeah, exactly. So you're gonna have to grab the big seed, like from the Sequoia,
Yeah.
and I think if you pass the kind of the nail on it, we're gonna get that sound.
I have another idea.
Yeah, exactly, that one. So wait, I need to change something here. Yeah. Yeah, slowly, yeah. And it can be a little bit further from the mic. We got it. I love it. Cool. Should we bring some musical instruments to it?
Yes, and I think I would add something deep and somber. What you have?
Like more in the rhythm or more like in a bass line?
Bass line.
Okay, love. And love is a bass line. You're gonna choose the sound, okay? I'm gonna play the notes, you tell me.
Less shrill, more...
I'm gonna give you one and you choose.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
You like this?
Mm-hmm.
I'm loving this. Love it. Should we bring some drums or?
What could resemble birds?
Birds.
I love it.
Very.
A digital bird.
Yeah. It's a robotic bird, so we have.
But we can do birds. Birds is super easy. I love it, man. I told you, I'm so glad I told everything I said before you started, you know? I'm feeling like this kind of a trip hop, like. You like this? It's your song.
Yeah. Another theme song for the regenerative expression dance.
Which of the two you like?
The last one.
Should we add more elements?
I think it needs a crescendo, something that, no?
I just feel like kind of a nice guitar would be nice to it, like.
Something melodic overlaying it, which starts later.
Yeah, do you like it?
Yeah.
It's nice with effect, huh? Okay, amazing. So, perfect. So we now have our bases. I'm gonna ask you to grab the box. Choose one for you.
One what?
That's the big question.
Surprises.
Well, as I'm a cyclist.
Thank you. For me. Yes.
Nice. Now we're gonna jam for the grand finale. You ready?
All right.
Let's go. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Tell me something about the episode, something to close it.
Thanks for having me. I enjoyed the conversation. I hope that many people in Berlin will consider joining the regenerative journey with them and look at our job postings, of course.
Now tell me one word, for example.
Resilience. 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 Resilience.
Yay! That was the funkiest tune. Nice. Thank you, Robert, and thank you, Diego, for leading us.
Thank you very
through that.
much.
Really nice. Robert, it was an amazing pleasure to talk with you. You were sharing us and really breaking down the complexities of some terms, but also the environment and particularly the impact space. What I'm taking away is that future of impact needs to be, we need to learn from the beautiful Sequoia tree that also you brought a piece with us, which is stay connected, standing together, be resilient, and above everything, think about the long-lasting impact. So thank you very much for sharing. I'm really, really, really happy to have this conversation with you.
Thank you very much, Robert.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for all the good insights. Amazing.
It's been a pleasure.
And see you all in the next episode.
Bye.
Bye-bye.